The diplomatic vessel. Harmony's edge drifted through the void between stars, its hull gleaming silver against the darkness. Ambassador Ji-won Park stood before the main viewport, watching the alien station grow larger as they approached. The Galactic. Convergence had built their meeting place in neutral space, a massive structure that looked like a crystal flower blooming in the emptiness. 12 different alien species had contributed to its construction, and it showed in the strange mix of architectural styles that somehow worked together. Ji-won adjusted her formal diplomatic robes and checked her translation device one more time. After 300 years of human expansion into space, this was their first official contact with the galactic community. Humanity had spread across dozens of star systems, building colonies and space stations, but they had always been alone. Now they were about to meet the neighbors who had been watching them for decades. Captain Minho Kim walked up beside her, his military uniform crisp and clean. The Seoul's Defiance, their escort frigate, maintained a respectful distance from the diplomatic ship. Minho had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, but this mission made him nervous in ways that asteroid mining pirates never had. The aliens had made it clear that humans were expected to attend this meeting, not invited. Dr. Yuna Lee joined them at the viewport, her scientific equipment beeping softly as it recorded everything about their approach. As the mission's xenobiologist, she would be responsible for analyzing whatever they learned about these alien species. Her preliminary reports had been fascinating but limited. The aliens had shared very little information about themselves, preferring to observe rather than communicate. The docking process went smoothly, with automated systems guiding the Harmonies, edge into a berth designed for ships of their size. Artificial gravity kicked in as they passed through the energy barrier that kept the station's atmosphere contained. The air inside tasted different, with trace elements that reminded Yuna of ozone and copper. Their escort met them at the airlock, a tall figure in flowing robes that seemed to shift color as it moved. The translator identified the being as a member of the Selenite hierarchy, one of the founding species of the Convergence. Its voice came through the device as smooth and emotionless, welcoming them to the station and guiding them through corridors lined with artwork from a dozen different worlds. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around a central platform. Representatives from 12 alien species were already present, their forms ranging from humanoid to utterly alien. Some breathed the same atmosphere as humans, while others wore environmental suits or sat in specialized tanks. The diversity was overwhelming, but Ji-won noticed something that made her stomach tighten. Every single one of them was watching the human delegation with the same expression, despite their different faces and features. It was the look a predator gives prey before deciding whether to hunt or ignore it. High Arbiter Velthanor rose from the central platform, its form vaguely reptilian, but covered in what looked like living metal. When it spoke, the translation came through clearly, but there was something in the original alien words that the device could not capture. An undertone of contempt that made Minho's hand drift unconsciously toward where his sidearm would normally rest. The High Arbiter began with what sounded like a formal welcome, explaining how the Convergence had maintained peace and order in this sector of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. It spoke of the careful balance between species, the wisdom of cooperation, and the benefits of guidance for younger civilizations. But as the speech continued, Ji-won realized they were not being welcomed as equals. They were being told how things would work. Humanity had been observed since their first steps beyond their home system, the High Arbiter explained. Their expansion had been noted and evaluated. Their technology was primitive but showed potential. Their social structures were chaotic but could be improved. Most concerning, their tendency toward conflict and competition made them unsuitable for independent development. They required guidance to become productive members of the galactic community. Dr. Lee's equipment registered increased stress hormones in all three humans as the true nature of the meeting became clear. This was not first contact between equals. This was a sentencing hearing. The terms presented to humanity were simple and non-negotiable. Human expansion would cease immediately. All human colonies beyond their first 10-star systems would be evacuated and turned over to more suitable species. Human technology development would be overseen by convergence advisors to ensure it developed along approved lines. Human reproduction would be regulated to prevent overpopulation. Human education would be standardized to eliminate destructive tendencies toward individualism and aggression. In exchange, humanity would be protected from the dangers of unguided development. They would be given access to approved alien technologies. They would be assigned suitable roles in the galactic economy. They would have the privilege of contributing to the greater good under proper supervision. Captain Kim watched the alien representatives as these terms were presented. Their body language was wrong for a negotiation. There were no signs of uncertainty or willingness to compromise. This had all been decided before the humans arrived. The meeting was just a formality, a way to make the conquest seem like a choice. The High Arbiter concluded by explaining that humanity had 72 hours to accept these generous terms. If they refused, corrective measures would be implemented to protect both humanity and the galactic community from the consequences of human recklessness. The exact nature of these measures was not specified, but examples were provided from galactic history. Dr. Lee's analysis equipment quietly recorded the alien displays that accompanied these examples. 3 different species had been given similar choices in the past. Their refusal had led to their complete disappearance from galactic records, not just military defeat or political absorption, but total erasure. Their worlds were empty now, their technology forgotten, their very names spoken only as warnings to other species who might consider rejecting convergence guidance. Ambassador Park requested the full 72 hours to consider the terms and consult with her government. The High Arbiter agreed with what might have been magnanimous generosity in another context. Here it felt like a cat allowing a mouse to run before pouncing. The human delegation was escorted back to their ship with the same ceremony that had welcomed them, but now the artwork lining the corridors looked different. What had seemed like cultural celebration now looked like trophies from conquered civilizations. Back aboard the Harmony's Edge, the 3 humans sat in silence for several minutes after the airlock sealed. The magnitude of what they had just experienced was difficult to process. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence had revealed that they were surrounded by a galactic empire that viewed them as dangerous children who needed to be controlled or eliminated. Dr. Lee was the first to speak, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Her analysis of the alien technology displays had revealed capabilities far beyond anything humanity possessed. Energy weapons that could crack planets, ships that moved faster than human physics said was possible, and manufacturing techniques that could reshape matter at the molecular level. But more concerning were the subtle details she had noticed about the aliens themselves. Each species seemed to excel in one particular area while being limited in others. The Vorthak were clearly warrior specialists, bred and trained for combat, but showing little creativity or adaptability. The Selenites appeared to be administrators and planners, highly intelligent but rigid in their thinking. Every species in the convergence had been shaped into a specific role, like organs in a larger body. Captain Kim shared his own observations about alien behavior and tactics. Their formation flying was perfect but predictable. Their security arrangements were thorough but followed obvious patterns. Most telling, they had made no effort to hide their weaknesses or conceal their capabilities. They genuinely believed that humanity posed no threat worth preparing for. Ambassador Park listened to both reports before composing her message to Earth. The communication would take several hours to reach the home system through quantum entanglement relays, but the response time was less important than the content. She needed to warn Earth that humanity faced a choice between slavery and extinction, and that the aliens offering this choice had already demonstrated their willingness to choose extinction for species who refused to submit. The coded message she finally sent was brief but complete. Earth would understand that their first contact had revealed an enemy, not an ally. The 72-hour deadline was not really for consideration, but for preparation. Whatever humanity chose to do, they would need to do it quickly and decisively. As the Harmony's Edge prepared for departure from the Convergence Station, the three humans took one last look at the massive structure through their viewport. It was beautiful in its own way, a testament to what multiple species could accomplish when working together. But now they knew the price of that cooperation, and it was higher than any free species should be willing to pay. The aliens had made their intentions clear. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened in the Sol Arcology 36 hours after Ambassador Park's coded message arrived. President Taehyung Choi stood before the massive holographic display that showed humanity's territory, scattered across 47 star systems. Each system represented millions of human lives, decades of terraforming work, and centuries of accumulated knowledge and culture. The aliens wanted to take 37 of those systems and reduce humanity to a carefully managed reservation. Fleet Admiral So-min Wang activated the strategic display, showing the positions of every human ship, station, and installation within 100 light-years of Earth. The fleet looked impressive on paper, with over 3,000 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to nimble scouts. But compared to the alien capabilities described in Dr. Lee's report, it might as well have been fishing boats preparing to fight aircraft carriers. Intelligence Director Kyung-ho Nam cleared his throat and began presenting what his department had learned about the galactic convergence over the past 3 decades. The aliens believed they had been observing humanity secretly, but human intelligence had been aware of the Watchers for almost as long. Every merchant vessel that had visited human space had been quietly tracked and analyzed. Every communication intercept had been decoded and filed away. Every alien probe that had slipped past human detection networks had eventually been found and studied. The picture that emerged from decades of careful surveillance was both reassuring and terrifying. The aliens were individually more advanced than humans in almost every area of technology, but they showed disturbing signs of stagnation. Their ships used the same basic designs they had employed for centuries. Their tactics followed predictable patterns that had not evolved since their last major war. Most concerning of all, they seemed to have lost the ability to innovate or adapt to unexpected situations. Colonel Jisoo Kang stood up from her seat at the far end of the council chamber. As commander of the Ghost Battalion, humanity's most elite special operations unit, she had been quietly preparing for this day since the unit was formed 20 years ago. Her soldiers were scattered across human space and beyond, many of them operating under deep cover identities that had taken years to establish. Some had even managed to infiltrate alien territory, posing as traitors, researchers, or refugees from species that no longer existed. The Ghost Battalion had been developing contingency plans for every possible first contact scenario, including the one they now faced. Project Shadowfall was the most ambitious of these plans, involving the systematic infiltration and mapping of alien space by specially trained operatives using modified human ships that could pass for civilian vessels. Over the past decade, these operatives had visited every major alien world, documented their defenses, and identified critical vulnerabilities in their infrastructure. Dr. In-ho Seo presented the results of the Human Adaptation Project, a classified program that had been developing enhanced humans for extreme environments and combat situations. Unlike the aliens, who relied purely on technology for environmental adaptation, humans had chosen to modify themselves at the genetic level. The program had produced variants capable of surviving in hard vacuum, operating under crushing gravity, and functioning in toxic atmospheres that would kill unmodified humans in seconds. These enhanced humans were not just physically superior, but mentally adapted for their environments as well. Those designed for space operations could think clearly under conditions that would cause normal humans to panic. Those modified for high-gravity worlds could process information faster and react more quickly than baseline humans. Most importantly, all variants retained the human ability to learn, adapt, and innovate under pressure. President Choi listened to each presentation before calling for recommendations. The council chamber fell silent as the leaders of humanity's military and intelligence services considered their options. Surrender would mean the effective end of human civilization as they knew it. Military resistance seemed hopeless against superior alien technology. But there was a third option that none of the aliens seemed to have considered. Admiral Wong was the first to speak, outlining a strategy that had been developed over decades of wargaming and analysis. Humanity would not fight a conventional war against the aliens because conventional warfare favored whoever had better technology. Instead, they would fight an asymmetric campaign designed to exploit the aliens' weaknesses while avoiding direct confrontation with their strengths. Taco. Alien species were specialists who had been shaped by centuries of peace and cooperation. They expected conflicts to follow established patterns and rules. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by those rules, and their rigid thinking made them vulnerable to tactics they had never encountered before. Director Nam explained how human intelligence networks could disrupt alien communications and supply lines without the aliens initially realizing they were under attack. Critical systems could be sabotaged months before their failure became apparent. Key personnel could be eliminated in ways that looked like accidents or natural causes. Most importantly, the aliens could be manipulated into making mistakes that would expose even greater vulnerabilities. Colonel Kang outlined how the Ghost Battalion could strike at targets the aliens had never thought to defend. Military academies where future alien officers learned their rigid tactics. Research facilities where new technologies were developed according to predictable patterns. Command centers where decisions were made by beings who had never experienced true uncertainty or fear. Dr. Seo described how adapted humans could operate in environments the aliens considered impossible to infiltrate. Space-adapted variants could survive for weeks in the void between stars, allowing them to approach targets without using detectable ships. High-gravity variants could function on worlds where alien equipment would be crushed under its own weight. Most versatile of all, the psychological warfare specialists could blend into alien populations and spread confusion and doubt through carefully targeted disinformation campaigns. The plan that emerged from 6 hours of discussion was unlike anything in recorded military history. Humanity would appear to surrender while simultaneously launching a campaign of sabotage, infiltration, and psychological warfare designed to collapse the alien empire from within. The aliens expected either submission or open rebellion, but they had no protocols for dealing with an enemy that appeared to comply while systematically dismantling their civilization. President Choi called for a vote on the proposal. The decision was unanimous, but several council members noted the enormous risks involved. If the plan failed, humanity would face extinction. If it succeeded, they would become the dominant power in their region of the galaxy, inheriting responsibility for billions of alien lives. Either outcome would change humanity forever. The response to the alien ultimatum was crafted carefully over the remaining 30 hours of the deadline. Ambassador Park would deliver a single-word answer that would tell the aliens nothing about human intentions while buying time for the real operation to begin. The word chosen was simple, direct, and completely accurate from a certain point of view. As the deadline approached, Ghost Battalion teams across human space received their final orders. Enhanced humans who had been training for decades prepared for missions that would take them deep into alien territory. Intelligence networks that had been gathering information for years activated sleeper agents and began implementing disruption protocols. The most critical element of the plan involved the systematic replacement of key alien infrastructure with human-designed alternatives that looked identical but contained hidden vulnerabilities. This had been accomplished gradually over years of trade and cooperation, with human manufacturers offering improved versions of alien equipment that performed better while containing subtle flaws that could be exploited when necessary. Dr. Lee's analysis of alien psychology had revealed that each species valued efficiency and standardization above all else. This made them vulnerable to attacks on their shared systems and common technologies. A virus designed to target their communication. Networks could spread across all 12 species simultaneously. A manufacturing flaw introduced into their standardized equipment could cripple their entire industrial base. The aliens had also made the mistake of assuming that human, primitive technology was genuinely inferior to their own. In reality, human engineers had been developing alternative approaches that accomplished the same goals through different means. When alien technology failed, humans would be the only ones capable of providing replacements that actually worked. Fleet Admiral Wong coordinated the final deployment of human forces across their territory. To outside observers, it would look like humanity was preparing for a conventional defense of their core systems. In reality, they were positioning themselves for a campaign that would end with human fleets surrounding every alien homeworld simultaneously. The countdown to the deadline played out on displays throughout human space. Citizens who had been told only that first contact had occurred waited nervously for news of their species' fate. The Vorthak Military Academy on Kessel Prime was conducting its morning formation when the explosions began. Lieutenant Yoonji Park had been attending classes there for 2 years as part of a cultural exchange program, one of dozens of human students scattered across alien educational institutions. The aliens believed they were observing human learning patterns and social development. They had no idea they were hosting infiltrators who had been mapping every critical system on their worlds. Yoonji moved through the academy corridors with practiced ease, her modified human physiology allowing her to function normally in the higher gravity that made most species sluggish. The explosive charges she had been placing for months were small and precisely targeted, designed to create maximum psychological impact rather than simple destruction. Each blast was accompanied by holographic messages in perfect Vorthak military dialect, explaining exactly how the infiltration had been accomplished and what it meant for their security. The message was simple but devastating in its implications. If humans could place explosives in the most secure military facility in Vorthak space without detection, what else had they done? The paranoia that followed would be more destructive than any weapon, turning the aliens against each other as they searched for threats that might not exist while missing real ones that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Simultaneously, similar operations were taking place at the Selenite Strategic Planning Institute and the Hydrian Naval War College. Ghost Battalion operatives who had spent years establishing their cover identities revealed themselves in carefully coordinated strikes that demonstrated the true scope of human infiltration. The aliens had believed they were mentoring primitive humans in the basics of galactic civilization. They discovered they had been teaching advanced human intelligence operatives everything about alien weaknesses and blind spots. The strikes were not designed to kill, though some casualties were inevitable. Their purpose was to prove that humans could reach anywhere in alien space whenever they chose. The explosions were precisely calculated to destroy records and equipment while leaving personnel mostly unharmed but thoroughly demoralized. The survivors would carry stories of human capabilities back to their governments, stories that would be more frightening than any propaganda. Admiral Heejin Yu watched the first phase results from her command ship hidden in the asteroid belt, of a system the aliens had never bothered to explore. The Soul's Vengeance was one of dozens of human vessels that had been operating in alien space for years, disguised as mining ships, research vessels, or merchant traders. Their true purpose had been to map every critical installation and establish supply caches for the war that everyone knew was coming. The merchant vessel disguise had been particularly effective because it allowed human ships to visit every major alien world under the pretense of trade and cultural exchange. Traders Donghyun Lee and Minji Cho had spent 3 years establishing commercial relationships with suppliers across 12 different alien species. Their ship, the Peaceful Prophet, had delivered goods to military bases, research facilities, and government installations throughout alien territory. What the aliens had not realized was that every delivery contained more than just trade goods. Nanoscale devices had been embedded in everything from food supplies to industrial equipment, creating an invisible network that could monitor communications, disrupt power systems, and provide targeting data for human weapons. The aliens had essentially paid humans to bug their entire civilization. The second phase of the operation began exactly 6 hours after the Academy strikes, as alien leadership was still trying to understand what had happened. Power grids across 12 different worlds began experiencing cascading failures that looked like equipment malfunctions, but followed patterns too complex to be coincidental. Communication networks suffered interference that seemed random, but actually prevented effective coordination between alien military units. Most disturbing of all, the aliens discovered that their supposedly secure command channels had been compromised for years. Orders they had given, strategies they had discussed, and intelligence they had gathered had all been monitored by human operatives who used the information to stay one step ahead of every countermeasure. The paranoia that had started with the Academy bombings spread through alien command structures like a virus. Captain Seojun Park commanded the defense platform Terra's Wrath, which appeared to be humanity's primary defensive installation protecting the Earth system. When the alien fleet arrived expecting to find a primitive world defended by obsolete technology, they instead encountered weapons systems that seemed to violate the laws of physics as the aliens understood them. The human defense grid used technology that had been reverse-engineered from alien equipment captured or stolen over decades of covert operations. But more than simple copying, human engineers had improved on alien designs by combining technologies that the specialized alien species had never thought to integrate. Vorthak weapons powered by selenite energy systems and guided by Hydrian. Sensors created capabilities that no single alien species possessed. The first battle above Earth lasted 6 hours and ended with the alien fleet retreating in confusion after losing nearly half their ships to defenses that seemed to anticipate their every move. The aliens had planned their attack based on decades of observing human capabilities, but those observations had been carefully manipulated to show them exactly what humans wanted them to see. The human ships that emerged to harass the retreating alien fleet were unlike anything in the aliens' databases. They moved with impossible agility, struck with devastating precision, and disappeared before effective counterfire could be directed at them. The aliens realized they had been fighting shadows while the real human military prepared for a war. Unlike anything in galactic history, Director Kyung-ho Nam monitored the psychological warfare campaign from his headquarters deep beneath the Soul Arcology. His teams had spent years studying alien psychology and social structures, identifying the pressure points where carefully applied force could create maximum disruption. The aliens were discovering that their rigid hierarchies and specialized thinking made them vulnerable to attacks they had never imagined. False intelligence was being fed into alien communication networks, suggesting that some species were planning to abandon the convergence and make separate peace deals with humanity. Forged documents indicated that certain alien leaders were secretly sympathetic to human positions. Anonymous messages spread rumors about hidden human weapons and capabilities that went far beyond anything the aliens had actually observed. The goal was not to create panic, but to foster doubt and mistrust among species that had cooperated for centuries. each alien government would begin questioning the loyalty and competence of the others, making coordinated response impossible, while humans systematically dismantled their collective power structure. Dr. Inho Seo's Enhanced Humans began, revealing their true capabilities as the third phase of operations commenced. Space-adapted variants who had been posing as normal human colonists suddenly demonstrated their ability to operate in environments that should have been instantly lethal. High-gravity specialists showed strength and endurance that made them effectively superhuman compared to baseline aliens. Most unsettling of all were the psychological warfare specialists who had been living among alien populations for years. These humans could perfectly mimic alien behavior patterns, speak alien languages without accent, and blend into alien society so completely that even close examination failed to reveal their true nature. The discovery that humans had been living undetected in alien cities for years created a level of paranoia that approached mass hysteria. The aliens attempted to coordinate their response through emergency communication channels, only to discover that many of their most trusted communication networks had been compromised from the beginning. Orders were intercepted and altered, intelligence reports were modified to create confusion, and strategic plans were leaked to human forces before they could be implemented. Colonel Jisoo Kang's Ghost Battalion operatives began their final phase. Operations as alien society started to collapse under the weight of accumulated paranoia and systemic failures. Critical infrastructure that had been operating normally for centuries suddenly developed faults that cascaded through interconnected systems. Automated factories produced defective equipment, transportation networks suffered routing errors, and even basic utilities became unreliable. The aliens had built their civilization on the assumption that their technology was inherently superior, and their cooperation was unbreakable. They discovered that humans had turned their strengths into weaknesses by making them dependent on systems that could be manipulated or disrupted from within. Each alien species began blaming the others for the cascading failures that were destroying their ability to function as a coherent military force. The Vorthak accused the Selenites of incompetent planning, while the Selenites blamed the Hydrians for communication failures. Trust that had been built over millennia eroded in days as each species became convinced that the others were either compromised by human infiltration or secretly working with the enemy. The agricultural colony of New Busan had been chosen for attack precisely because it appeared to be defenseless. The alien intelligence reports described it as a typical human farming settlement with a population of 50,000 civilians engaged in food production for the inner colonies. The Vorthak fleet that approached the system expected to find frightened farmers who would surrender immediately or die quickly, providing an example that would break human resistance across their territory. Farmer. Youngman Jang was working in his greenhouse when the alien ships appeared in the system's outer reaches. He calmly activated his communication device and sent a brief message to the colony's coordination center before returning to his plants. The tomatoes he was growing required precise care, and alien invasions were no excuse for neglecting proper agricultural technique. Teacher. Hyein Kim was conducting a lesson on galactic history when her students' tablets began displaying tactical information about the approaching fleet. The 12-year-olds in her classroom immediately began implementing emergency protocols they had been practicing since they could walk. Some moved to secure the school's defensive systems, while others coordinated with their parents through encrypted channels that the aliens would never be able to intercept. The Vorthak commander expected to find chaos and panic as his fleet entered the inner system. Instead, he found a colony that had gone completely silent and appeared to be abandoned. Orbital scans showed no signs of life, no energy signatures, and no defensive installations. The humans seemed to have simply vanished, leaving behind empty buildings and inactive machinery. What the aliens did not realize was that they were looking at the most sophisticated trap ever constructed. New Busan had been designed from the beginning as a fortress disguised as a farm, with every building, every piece of equipment, and every acre of farmland serving multiple purposes. The greenhouses that grew food for human colonies also housed manufacturing facilities for military equipment. The irrigation systems that watered crops could be reconfigured as weapons targeting networks. Major Wanho Shin had spent 5 years preparing New Busan for exactly this scenario. As the colony's secret military commander, he had overseen the installation of defense systems that were completely invisible to standard alien sensors. The population of farmers included thousands of retired military personnel, special operations veterans, and technical specialists who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in human space. The aliens landed their forces expecting to occupy an empty world and establish a forward base for future operations. They found buildings that appeared abandoned but were actually automated weapons platforms waiting for activation codes. They established command posts in structures that had been designed to become death traps at the touch of a button. Most critically, they began using infrastructure that humans had built specifically to be turned against anyone who tried to control it. The first indication that something was wrong came when alien communication equipment began malfunctioning in ways that suggested sabotage rather than technical failure. Power systems that had been working perfectly when the aliens tested them started experiencing cascading failures that followed patterns too complex to be accidental. Transportation vehicles broke down in ways that stranded alien personnel in predetermined locations where they could be monitored or eliminated as necessary. Dr. Yeji Lim watched the alien landing from her concealed laboratory beneath the colony's main research facility. As the head of the Human Adaptation Project's Field Testing Division, she had been developing new variants of enhanced humans, specifically designed to counter the capabilities of each alien species. The Vorthak forces, now occupying the surface, were about to encounter soldiers. They had no training to fight and no equipment to detect. The enhanced humans who emerged from hidden bunkers across the colony were adapted specifically for warfare against Vorthak physiology and psychology. They could see in spectrums that Vorthak eyes could not perceive, move silently across ground that would reveal normal human footsteps, and operate weapons that used frequencies that caused debilitating pain to Vorthak nervous systems. More unsettling than their physical capabilities were their psychological adaptations. These humans had been modified to understand Vorthak body language, vocal patterns, and social hierarchies well enough to predict individual behavior and exploit personal weaknesses. They could wage psychological warfare against alien minds that had never been exposed to human creativity in causing fear and confusion. The battle for New Busan lasted 3 weeks, but it was unlike any conflict in recorded galactic history. The aliens controlled the surface installations and orbital space, but they could not control the population that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Every attempt to establish secure positions resulted in mysterious equipment failures and personnel disappearing without trace. The Vorthak forces found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to engage in conventional combat. Instead of massed formations and direct assaults, they faced individual humans who struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible. Weapons and vehicles were sabotaged during the night. Food supplies were contaminated with compounds that caused hallucinations and paranoia, and communication systems were compromised in ways that fed false information to alien commanders. General Hongbin Yang coordinated the counteroffensive from his mobile command center, hidden in the asteroid fields of an uninhabited system 3 light-years away. His staff had been analyzing alien tactics and psychology for decades, preparing for the moment when humanity would need to fight a war against superior technology and overwhelming numbers. The battle at New Busan was their laboratory for testing theories that would determine the fate of human civilization. The key insight that drove human strategy was that alien military doctrine had evolved during centuries of peace and cooperation between species with similar capabilities and mindsets. The aliens had protocols for dealing with rebellion, invasion, and even civil war, but they had no experience with an enemy that treated warfare as an art form rather than a necessary evil. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting wars against other humans, developing levels of creativity and ruthlessness that peaceful alien species could not match. Every human child learned strategic thinking through games that aliens would consider advanced military training. Every human adult understood concepts of deception, misdirection, and psychological manipulation that alien minds found difficult to grasp. The enhanced humans fighting on New Busan demonstrated capabilities that broke alien understanding of what was possible for organic beings. They could survive injuries that should have been fatal, operate in environments that should have been lethal, and maintain combat effectiveness under conditions that would break the morale of any known species. Most disturbing of all was their apparent ability to learn and adapt during combat in ways that allowed them to counter alien tactics faster than those tactics could be implemented. The Vorthak commanders found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move while remaining completely unpredictable in its own actions. The psychological impact of the New Busan operation spread far beyond the colony itself. Other alien species began receiving reports that described human capabilities that seemed to border on the supernatural. Soldiers who could become invisible at will, weapons that could strike targets through solid barriers, and defensive systems that appeared to operate without any visible power source or control mechanism. The Vorthak attempt to occupy New Busan became a disaster that undermined alien confidence throughout their territory. A simple punitive expedition against defenseless farmers had become a grinding campaign against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. The colony that should have been captured in hours remained under human control after weeks of fighting. Intelligence reports began filtering back to alien command centers describing tactics and technologies that their databases could not explain. Humans were using biological weapons that targeted specific alien species while leaving others unaffected. They were deploying electronic warfare systems that could disable alien equipment without affecting their own devices. Most concerning of all, they seemed to possess detailed information about alien vulnerabilities that should have been classified at the highest levels. Dr. Lim's field reports documented the effectiveness of each enhanced human variant against different types of alien opposition. The data she collected would be used to develop even more specialized modifications for future operations, creating an evolutionary arms race where human adaptability would always stay one step ahead of alien countermeasures. The battle for New Busan revealed the true scope of human preparation for galactic conflict. Every colony, every space station, and every human installation had been designed and equipped for asymmetric warfare against technologically superior enemies. The aliens had thought they were attacking civilian targets, but they discovered that in human society there were no purely civilian targets, because every human settlement was a potential fortress and every human citizen was a potential soldier. 6 months after the first alien ultimatum, the emergency session of the Galactic Convergence Council convened in circumstances none of the member species had ever imagined possible. The magnificent crystal chamber that had once symbolized their collective power now felt like a prison as alien leaders gathered to discuss the complete collapse of their military authority and the systematic dismantling of their civilization. High Arbiter Velthanor looked around the council chamber at representatives who had once commanded the respect and fear of entire star systems. The Vorthak Military Council had lost contact with half their fleet and could no longer guarantee the security of their own homeworld. The Selenite hierarchy was paralyzed by internal investigations as they searched for infiltrators who might not exist while missing real threats that had been operating for years. Fleet Marshal Yeben Han appeared in the chamber not as a prisoner or supplicant, but as a holographic projection broadcast simultaneously to every alien world in convergence, space, Her message bypassed all military command structures and alien government controls, speaking directly to the civilian populations who had been told nothing about the war that was destroying their civilization from within. The human message was simple and delivered in each species' own language with perfect cultural context and emotional nuance. The military leaders of the Convergence had demanded conflict with humanity, and humans had responded by demonstrating the true meaning of ruthless warfare. But the war would end immediately if the alien governments chose to surrender rather than continue fighting a battle they could not win. What made the message truly devastating was that it was accompanied by complete documentation of every human operation over the past 6 months. Each alien species could see exactly how their security had been compromised, their infrastructure sabotaged, and their military capabilities neutralized. The humans were not gloating or threatening, they were simply explaining what they had done and why it had been necessary. Commander Ho-Suk Choi materialized in the council chamber as his cloaking field deactivated, revealing that a human special operations team had been present throughout the emergency session. Strike Team Alpha had infiltrated the most secure facility in Convergent space, not to assassinate alien leaders, but to deliver a personal invitation to discuss surrender terms over tea in the chamber's ceremonial garden. The aliens discovered that their supposedly impregnable fortress had been compromised for years, with human operatives having access to their most classified discussions and strategic planning sessions. The security failures that had allowed this infiltration were not accidents or oversights, but the result of systematic manipulation that had turned their own defensive systems against them. Dr. Sung-Hyun Bae presented each alien leader with detailed analyses of their respective civilizations that demonstrated human understanding of alien psychology, culture, and social structures at levels that exceeded the aliens' own self-knowledge. The reports contained accurate predictions of how each species would respond to different types of pressure, what concessions they could be convinced to make, and how their populations could be turned against their governments if necessary. Aliens realized they were not just militarily defeated, but completely outmaneuvered on every level of civilization. Humans had been studying them for decades while presenting themselves as primitive newcomers to galactic society. Every diplomatic contact, every trade agreement, and every cultural exchange had been part of a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation that mapped every weakness in alien society. President Da-Young Jin delivered humanity's final terms through the same communication networks that had carried her marshal's earlier message. The terms were broadcast in real time to every alien world, ensuring that civilian populations would know exactly what their leaders were being offered and what the consequences of refusal would be. Humanity offered the alien species a choice between partnership and extinction, but the choice came with complete documentation of what partnership would mean. The aliens could maintain their civilizations and cultures under human oversight, contributing their specialized knowledge to a new galactic order led by beings who understood both cooperation and competition. Alternatively, they could continue fighting until their civilizations collapsed entirely under the weight of human pressure. The terms were not negotiable because they reflected the reality of power in the galaxy after 6 months of human operations. Every alien world now depended on infrastructure that humans controlled, technology that humans had designed, and trade networks that humans managed. The aliens could surrender and retain some autonomy, or they could be reduced to primitive subsistence on worlds stripped of all advanced technology. What made the human offer particularly compelling was that it came with guarantees backed by demonstrated capability. Humans would not enslave alien populations or destroy their cultures, but they would control the technology and resources that made advanced civilization possible. The aliens would be junior partners in a galactic community led by beings who had proven their ability to wage war more effectively than anyone had imagined possible. The alien leaders found themselves facing a choice between accepting human leadership or watching their civilizations die slowly as critical systems continued to fail, and their populations lost faith in governments that could not protect them. The humans had not conquered through destruction, but through making continued resistance impossible. The Vorthak War Council was the first to acknowledge the futility of continued fighting. Their military doctrine was based on honor and direct confrontation, but there was no honor in leading their people to extinction through pride and stubbornness. They formally requested negotiations for conditional surrender, hoping to retain some measure of dignity in defeat. The Selenite hierarchy followed within hours, their analytical minds recognizing the mathematical certainty of their position. They had built their civilization on logical planning and efficient administration, but humans had demonstrated superior planning and more efficient methods of achieving strategic objectives. Continued resistance violated every principle of rational decision-making. One by one, the remaining species of the convergence accepted the reality of human dominance. Some tried to negotiate better terms or special concessions, but they discovered that humans had anticipated every possible objection and prepared responses that addressed alien concerns while maintaining human control over critical decisions. Surrender ceremonies took place simultaneously on every alien homeworld, with human representatives who had been living in alien societies for years revealing their true identities and roles. The aliens learned that beings they had known as friends, colleagues, and even family members were actually human operatives who had been gathering intelligence and building the networks that made conquest possible. Ambassador Ji-Won Park returned to the Convergence Council chamber exactly 1 year after delivering humanity's original refusal to submit to alien authority. The chamber had been restored to its original beauty, but the power dynamics had been completely reversed. The alien leaders who had once delivered ultimatums now waited to sign documents that formalized their surrender and acceptance of human leadership. The signing ceremony was broadcast throughout human space as a celebration of survival and victory against impossible odds. But it was also transmitted to alien worlds as a demonstration of human justice and mercy. The species that had demanded humanity's submission were being allowed to retain their dignity and autonomy within carefully defined limits. High Arbiter Velthanor spoke the final words of the old galactic order as he signed the surrender documents that transferred authority over convergence space to human administration. His words were carried by communication networks that humans now controlled to populations that had learned to respect human capabilities while hoping for human fairness. The High Arbiter's final statement became the epitaph for the galactic convergence and the foundation myth for the new galactic civilization that would emerge under human leadership. His words were simple, but captured the essence of what had happened when a peaceful empire encountered a species that understood both war and peace better than anyone had imagined possible. We demanded conflict from beings we believed to be weak and primitive. We should have asked what humans had learned from 5 billion years of surviving conflicts we could never imagine. The galaxy would remember this lesson as human explorers spread beyond convergent space to encounter other alien civilizations. The species that had demanded humanity's submission discovered that humans could be generous in victory and fair in leadership, but they never forgot the ruthless efficiency with which humans had dismantled their empire when cooperation was impossible. New galactic order would be built on the principle that conflict was always possible, but never necessary for beings intelligent enough to recognize when they had encountered a superior opponent. Humanity had proven their point not through destruction, but through demonstration, showing alien civilizations what war looked like when waged by beings who treated survival as an art form rather than an accident.